You ever wonder how we learn really big ideas? Well, it turns out one of the best ways is to wrap them up in a simple story. It's a pretty amazing teaching strategy, actually. You take one single narrative and it becomes a hook for all these different lessons. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on a fourth grade learning module to see how a classic Filipino folktale becomes this super powerful tool for teaching everything from literary theory all the way to grammar. Let's dive in and see how it's done.
So, at the center of all this is a young man named Suan from the province of Pampanga. He gets famous for this whole series of incredible feats that everybody just chalks up to amazing good luck. But that brings us to the big puzzle of his story. Was Suan just lucky, or was there something else going on entirely?
To really get how this educational module works, we first have to know the story at its heart. So, let's do a quick run-through of the legend of Sunai and his almost unbelievable string of successes.
Okay, so it all starts pretty small. Suan tricks his mom into thinking he can magically guess what she bought at the market. But his fame really blows up when a local chieftain, a Datu, loses his ring. Suan cleverly tricks the soldiers into revealing they stole it, then he tells the Datu it's inside a turkey, and what do you know? It is. Next, another Datu bets a fortune that Suan can't guess how many seeds are in his orange. Well, Suan secretly overhears that the number is 9, and bam, he wins again. For the final puzzle, the Datu tries to win his treasure back with something called a nonsense ball. Suan gets so frustrated he just yells, "Nonsense," which, you guessed it, sounds just like 9 cents, the ball's actual contents. And just like that, he wins for a fourth time.
A pretty wild story, right? But remember, this is the core of an educational module. It's designed to do way more than just entertain. So let's shift gears now from the story itself to how it's actually used as a tool to break down some surprisingly complex ideas for young students.
All right, first up, we're looking at the story's blueprint. The module uses Suan's adventure to teach the fundamental building blocks of any narrative, starting with the absolute basics.
So, the first concept is setting. The learning material keeps it simple. It's the where and the when of a story. And you figure it out by looking for clues in how people live, what they're wearing, or the things they do. And this is a brilliant example of how the lesson makes it real. The setting for our story isn't just some random village, it's a specific province in the Philippines, Pampanga, during a specific time in history, the era of the Datus. Instantly, that abstract idea of setting has a clear, easy-to-understand example. So, building on that, after you've got the where and the when, the module introduces the why of the story, its theme, the central idea, the message, or the moral lesson the story is trying to get across.
And here's the crucial part. Suan's story isn't really about his luck. It's a vehicle to explore something deeper. Was Suan actually wise, or was he just a clever trickster? His actions are used to start a whole conversation about the difference between tricking people and having real wisdom.
Now, every story has to be told by someone, right? So the next big concept this learning tool breaks down is point of view. Basically, how a story changes depending on who's telling it.
And the material makes this distinction crystal clear. First person puts you right inside a character's head. It uses I, like, I woke up early. Third person, on the other hand, is like having an outside observer telling the story, using he, she, or they. Like Lena walked through the haunted house.
So, applying this back to our folktale, it's pretty obvious that Suan's story is told from a third-person perspective. We're not inside his head hearing him think, I hope this works. Instead, we're watching all his actions from a distance, like an outsider looking in.
But get this, the module doesn't just stop at literary analysis. The story of Suan also becomes this grammar engine used to teach the mechanical nuts and bolts of the English language. This is where using a single story becomes incredibly efficient.
The specific focus here is on helping verbs, which you might also hear called auxiliary verbs. These are those small but really important words that work with the main verb to help it express action or a state of being.
And this table is just a perfect visual for the common to-be verbs. You know how in the present tense you say I am, but he is, and they are. And in the past tense that becomes I was, he was, but they were. The story of Suan gives students sentences where they can spot these exact verbs being used, connecting the rule to a real-world example.
So, we've deconstructed the story's blueprint, we've looked at its grammar, but what's the ultimate takeaway here? Well, the module brings it all together to teach a final, really profound lesson that goes way beyond the story itself.
Okay, let's be real. Suan wasn't lucky, he was a con artist. He got ahead by eavesdropping and tricking people, and the learning module doesn't shy away from that at all. It uses his sketchy methods to ask a much bigger question. What does real success actually look like?
And to really anchor its moral conclusion, the lesson brings in a verse from Proverbs. This quote directly challenges the whole idea of random chance or luck, and instead suggests that true outcomes aren't determined by our own little tricks.
And that brings us to the final, critical point of this whole thing. Suan's story becomes a cautionary tale. The module's ultimate takeaway is that relying on luck or deception, well, that's a shaky path. True, lasting success is built on a foundation of wisdom, honesty, and good old-fashioned hard work.
It's really amazing, isn't it, how one single folktale can be packed with so many layers of learning, from story structure to grammar to these deep moral questions. It kind of leaves you wondering, what were the simple stories that taught you big ideas? What tales from your own childhood were secretly powerful teaching tools?